Please join me in welcoming our first speaker to the stage, Alec Karakatsanis.
Thank you so much. Hello. So about a year and a half ago, last summer, I was standing outside the jail in Flint, Michigan. And as I was about to go into the jail to interview some clients, I noticed something on the sidewalk. Some chalk drawings written by local children. At the time, I didn't know what they meant, but I saw them and they really moved me. And I think the story of why I was outside that jail and what these chalk drawings are showing has really shaped and in fact changed the course of my career. So why was I there and what were these chalk drawings doing? So over the last 10 years, I've been litigating constitutional challenges to injustices in the criminal system all over the United States. One of the things we've been working on is the issue of cash bail. There are hundreds of thousands of human beings every single night in this country who are put in a jail cell, taken away from their families and children, just because they lack cash. The United States and the Philippines are the only two countries in the entire world that have a for-profit commercial money bail industry that decides whether or not you go home to your family if you're charged with a crime, or whether or not you're in a jail cell. One of the cases that we litigated actually was in the California Supreme Court, where we struck down, in a case that I argued a couple of years ago, the idea that a human being in California can be separated from their children, taken away from their family and their job, their home, their school, their church, their community. But all over the country, this is still happening every single day. And there are hundreds of thousands of people right now, as I'm talking to you, that are separated from their children and families. And one of the things that our clients in jails across the country started telling us a few years ago was, in addition to all of the other horrors that are happening to us every single day in jail, we've now been prohibited from visiting our children. Our children can't come in and see us. They can't give us a hug. They can't look into our eyes. They can't hold our hand. Why is this happening to us? So we started trying to look into it. We started doing freedom of information requests. We got all these contracts. We got all these documents. We started interviewing people. And something really horrific emerged. Across the country, thousands of jails affecting millions of children every single day have eliminated the right to family visits. Why have they done that? Well, it turns out there's a multi-billion-dollar prison phone and video telecom industry. And that industry had an idea. And they thought, you know what, if we prohibit people from actually visiting with their families, they'll be forced to spend more money on these expensive phone and video calls that we charge for. And how are we going to get this to happen, though? Well, they got together with sheriffs across the country, and they came up with a kickback scheme. Well, they will cut the sheriffs in on the profit and give them money. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And they'll give them money if the sheriffs agree to enforce bans on family visits. And so we started working with the children of Flint, Michigan, and other cities, and we're working with children now all over to challenge this practice, to establish what we're calling a constitutional right to hug your mom and your dad. And earlier this year, we brought the first two challenges to this practice, trying to assert something really fundamental, really basic, that all human beings, children, parents, have a right to human contact and dignity. And this is not just a case about letting children visit their parents in jail. It's about something much more subversive and much deeper. It's about challenging the notion that the criminal punishment bureaucracy can operate without thinking about the effects that it's having on children and families. And something even deeper than that, which is that anybody who looks at this policy and knows the state of the research, where the research is very clear. It's like early childhood development, being separated from your parents. It affects your performance in schools. It actually affects your likelihood to commit crime in the future. This is like the state of the science on this is like the state of the science on global warming. It's not controversial at all. And yet, it's happening every single day in courtrooms across the country. And these children are asserting something quite subversive, which is, if the system that is doing this to us for no good reason at all, but the profit of these telecom companies is doing this, how can we trust anything else it's doing? And there's something even deeper that I want to talk about as well. So as I was standing outside the jail, a group of employees from the sheriff's office came out with some soap and some mops and some hoses, and they washed away the children's messages. Now, why was this important? Well, actually, outside of the shot of this, there's some windows in the jail. And the reason the children had been writing messages on the chalk drawings was that because they could no longer see their moms and their dads, they looked up at the windows and their moms and their dads would be waving down at them and looking at the messages they were drawing for them. That simple act of human communication was too much for the sheriff's office. They didn't want that happening. So they came out and washed that away so the parents could no longer see those words of love from their children. And I took photos of this and actually put them in the legal complaint that we filed, trying to establish a constitutional right for children to hug their parents. And shortly after we filed the first case, Lester Holt and NBC Nightly News flew to this jail in Flint, Michigan, and put the sheriff on national television, on camera, and they said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, he admitted on national TV, "We're doing it for money. We're doing it for profit. It was wrong, and I'm going to stop doing it." And I think that's a really important that gets at something really profound for me, especially in this moment of rising authoritarianism. I think a lot of us are beginning to understand or have understood for a long time that authoritarianism relies on isolation, relies on fear-mongering, it relies on the lack of basic human connection that a lot of us, I think, feeling, maybe all of us are now feeling in our sort of modern society. The punishment bureaucracy relies on that every single day, when it throws people in jail without even talking about the effect of on their families and their communities. But there's something even more important and I think profound. I've been thinking a lot about George Orwell's 1984 recently. There's this part in the book that's a recurring theme, which is that the government is constantly trying to get everyone to think 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 2 = 5. And the premise that Orwell sort of begins with is that once you allow your own mind to believe, once you start saying to other people, but then once you allow your own mind to relent and to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, then all else is lost. Once you lose that connection to truth, all else is lost. And so we found the children that wrote that drawing that day, and they became our clients. And one of the things that they did, in addition to filing the civil lawsuit against the private equity firms that own the prison and jail telecom industry and against the sheriff, they also did something else that I think is even more important and more profound. They wrote a letter to the judge in their dad's case. Their dad had been in jail prior to trial, not convicted, for over a year, with almost no evidence that he was guilty. And the judge didn't even know that they didn't have visits at the jail. And as soon as the judge read that letter, he released their dad pre-trial. Now, the charges were later dropped against him. But that simple act of his children writing a letter to the judge and saying, "This is what it means to us that you've taken away our father." And not only that you've taken away our father without strong evidence or without any finding that he poses any kind of danger to the community, but you put him in a jail cell where armed guards are enforcing a policy where children are not even permitted to hold his hand or give him a hug. That was those children saying 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4. And that's the importance of human rights work and the civil rights work that we do in a time of rising authoritarianism. There's all kinds of ways we all need to fight these movements. We need to build our own social movements. We need to do all of the work that I'm sure many of you are engaged with. But there's something profound at the core of it all, and that is relentlessly telling the truth. Because if we can maintain, whether it's in a corporate boardroom or in a room like this, or in the darkest corners of our jail cells across the country where there's mucus and feces and blood and urine and mold on the floors and the ceilings and the walls, that's what the jails look like in this country. Or whether it's even in the darkest corners of our own mind. If we can remember at all times that 2 + 2 = 4, then there is hope. Because we haven't been fully compromised in the way that Orwell talked about. And that, to me, is what the Right to Hug Project is all about. And I hope that you'll take a chance. We'll send around some materials about the Right to Hug Project. It's going to be a national campaign. There's a lot of jails in California where people aren't allowed to visit with their loved ones. And there's a lot of jails all over the United States. But there's also a profound problem in our legal system with failing to take children seriously and failing to take the effects of what we're doing seriously, and also failing to think about the profound connection that all human beings need to one another. And so I hope you'll take a look at the materials that we send around and you'll think about ways you can get involved with the Right to Hug in your own community, because what those children showed when they got their dad out of jail that day is that the voices of human connection, the voices of families and children, and the voices of truth are actually the antidote to authoritarian bureaucracy in our time. And I think that is something that we all need to carry with us. So thank you so much.